Welcome to the Subconscious Elements podcast. Man, I'm here today with my co-host Tori Setliff, and we are breaking down the gene keys. We are on the 6th gene key, and I'm excited to get into it with you guys. Tori, lead the way.
All right, so the 6th gene key is going to be about the path towards peace. At the lowest frequency, we have conflict, which we see between individuals that both agree to associate with their emotional states. And towards the gift frequency, we have diplomacy. And through that, we will go to the highest level, which is therefore peace. And basically, the 6th gene key is going to be one of the most influential gene keys throughout human consciousness. Basically, at the lowest frequency, we have conflict, war, disagreements, and then at the highest level, we're going to have peace on earth throughout all conscious beings. Basically, conflict can be seen through all polarities and most commonly through sexes and relationships. I thought it was very interesting that it was explaining the age-old story of the battle of the sexes, basically saying that we are genetically predetermined to disagree with the opposite sex. And whether we're aware of it or not, we just naturally hold defenses high when engaging with the opposite sex.
Yeah, I like where it said, when two individuals agree to identify with their emotional state is what leads to conflict. Yeah, it's like that idea of how people will try to almost infect you with their emotional state, right? And you'll experience this a lot if you're in the workplace with your coworkers, or you're on a team where sometimes someone can come into a situation feeling a certain type of way, and they'll try their best unknowingly to make sure everyone else feels that way. And it's been explained to me in a way that these emotional states have a certain frequency, a certain vibration, and its main purpose is to exist. And the way that it exists is by trying to get as many other people to also vibrate at that same level. And so maybe you'll see someone and they're in a bad mood, and it's a lot of times really comical why they'll be in a bad mood, but they'll come into a situation in a bad mood and then they'll just like say snarky comments to people on their way into work or going about their day. They'll just like say something, and essentially they're trying to say something to make you feel the same way that they feel, which could be anger or discontentment or anxiety, all these things. And so, yeah, it's that idea of identifying with the current emotion that you're feeling.
And then trying to gain a reaction out of another person. And it's basically saying that if you do gain a reaction out of the other person, then that emotion has somewhat won in a sense. And when both people agree to engage in these reactions, they can further along the conflict. And only when one person disagrees and in a way refuses to engage in these emotions do we have some sort of pathway towards the resolution. And basically saying that at the gift level, one person has agreed to be more open-hearted in the situation and see further that engaging in that way is not leading towards the best conclusion.
Right, essentially to react or act in an emotional state, like anger is an easy one. You never want to act towards someone in an angry way because it'll almost never get you a desired result. Like the only way to act is from, at least neutral. And that's what it's saying, right? It's like when two people come at a situation from anger, it just makes things worse. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how if someone comes at someone with anger, if they don't return any anger, a lot of the times it can diffuse it if you just absorb it. Obviously, sometimes that can make that person even more angry, but But I genuinely think that if you absorb the information with good intentions, then a lot of times it'll disarm.
Yeah, it's basically saying that the best way to react is to balance like the yin and the yang. So basically absorb it and give back the energy with what you're saying, like a neutral charge rather than a negative polarized charge.
Right, and I think when you first hear that sentence, you might be a little confused because it's saying that you want to take in their energy and give it back, but just neutral. And it's like, well, how are you going to give them back the energy if it's neutral? But to me, that kind of reminds me of like how you're supposed to approach an angry customer when you're at the manager level. You're not supposed to just be emotionless. You're supposed to reach the same emotional state that they're in, but on their side. So if they're like really angry, you're supposed to portray the same emotion, but on their side. So they're like, who did this? Like, we're going to figure this out immediately. Like if you show the person that you have like the same care about the situation that they do, that disarms them. But if you're just like, oh, well, let me handle this, they can seem like you're not being genuine. But if you're like trying to meet them with it, you're a lot more likely to help them calm down.
Yeah, like a certain level of intensity and certain level of care, because they are taking their emotions and their reactions very serious. So you can't come at them with seeming like you don't care.
Right.
But for sure it was, so the codon ring is actually the ring of alchemy. And in that sense, what you're doing is you're taking that reaction, you're changing it and transmuting it and then giving it back. And then just by doing that, you're changing the shadow frequency of all conflict. That the more that we do this, the more other people will do it, and the more that it has this chain reaction of being more open-hearted and not allowing these things to affect you. It's like the drama in Hollywood that everyone wants to act so dramatic, and it's like, it's really not that serious if you just take away your strong held perspective and just step out of that perspective for just a moment. Then you can see that it probably doesn't matter as much as you think it does.
Yeah, I mean, almost always it absolutely doesn't matter. I can't remember if I told this story on this podcast or not, but I remember listening to two girls talk. I think I did tell this story, but I'm gonna say it again because again, you hear I overheard these two chicks, they're arguing back and forth, and they're not arguing, they're like talking about someone else who had said something messed up to one of the girls, and they're like, she's like, I just can't believe she'd say that. And she's like, oh, hell no. Yeah, that girl don't even be saying that about you, blah, 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 blah. And one of the girls was just so like upset over it. And I was like, I just kind of like leaned in and put my 2 pieces in. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't take it personal. She's jealous of what you're accomplishing. So don't even take it personal. Just let it know that she's just angry with herself. And then the other girl's like, how could she not take it personal? And they just like, continue to ignore me. But when you understand that what someone says has more to do with them than it does about you, you don't have to react to what it is that they're saying, and it's like obviously easier said than done, but yeah, it's like that classic saying, and this is something that I have to remind myself of, but hate never comes from above. As in, if someone is doing better than you, if they are genuinely doing better than you, most likely that person isn't spending their time hating on you. Like most of the time, if you talk to someone who's like on the same path as you and they're more successful, generally they're pretty encouraging. Like, because they realize that that's the mindset that you have to make it in this game is positivity and optimism. And generally, it's the people that aren't having the success that they would like that are trapped in the mindset of hating or trying to bring other people down.
Yeah, for sure. I just, when I was on the plane, the last time I was on a plane, I was just staring out the window because I had a window seat, and I was just watching everything just disappear and just get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then you realize like how minuscule you are in a sense, and then even more so your thoughts, and then even more so the problems that you have in everyday life. And you're just like, I was just in this little tiny piece of sand thinking about all these stressful things and driving myself crazy. And then you just like zoom out, and just seeing that zoom out perspective was very helpful for me in that sense. That's like detachment. And but for sure people definitely agree to silly conflicts on everyday life.
Yeah, no, they say
Seemingly
that.
no reason.
Same thing about astronauts who go to space, that seeing the world from that high up makes you realize that we're all the same people and that we're all a part of something bigger, which is pretty trippy, right? You having that same experience on a plane, but imagine that looking at the entire world.
Entire world, yeah. Yeah, I was saying that basically the world at large spends so much money on just defenses, and that if we were even to spend 1% of these funds towards like world peace, how different the world would be.
Oh yeah, well, so this book was written when? In 2022?
I'm not sure.
You should have it in the very beginning of the book. I mean, it's probably like 20...
First published 2009, and second edition 2011, third edition 2015.
So what it's saying is not even close to what we're spending. Like, it's saying how much we're spending on defenses, and then now we're in 2024 and we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. You know, and it's like, but we have hundreds of thousands of homeless people in the US. And it's like, obviously I don't want to sit here and claim to know the answer, but there's definitely something not right at the highest levels of our government to be sending that much money overseas and not to where we need it the most, which is our communities and also like the border. I mean, right now we're going through a crisis of just like everyone is just coming in, and we're not in control of who it is. And we were just listening to something the other day, and we're essentially giving money to these people, and they're like being sent into sex trafficking and slavery, and we are knowingly giving them money, like taxpayer dollars. And then so that money is now going to cartels and drug organizations and trafficking organizations, and we know it, and there's nothing that we can do about it because of these policies that the Border Patrol had to go by. So it's like this whole thing of just like where our money's going and where it's not supposed to be. It really does remind you of the Roman times. You know, like I was having this crazy experience watching the fights. We're watching UFC 299, and it's like watching these two dudes bash each other's brains in. And it's like, I love martial arts, and whether there's a coliseum or not, people are going to want to fight and challenge themselves in some sort of way. So in that sense, I love it. But when you watch someone get knocked out and they're still taking damage, and I'm literally yelling at the TV for the ref to stop it, and this idiot is just letting this dude get beat to death, and everyone's cheering, and it's like obviously like this huge spectacle, and it's just like, man, we're literally living, this might as well be fucking the Roman Empire, right? The Roman Empire fell because they were trying to conquer everything. So they had all these wars all the way on the edge. So they're sending all of their men to go fight these wars. So you got all the women and children in the center. They don't have enough money to pay for these wars. So a lot of these men don't even have anything to come back to. And so whatever little funds they had were being sent to manage these wars on the outskirts while the middle fell apart, because they didn't have any good men around to do the jobs that needed to be done. They didn't have, so none of that money was coming back. It's all being sent out, and none of these soldiers are even getting paid. So like, you can imagine, like, all their families are like living in poverty while these men are out like fighting Germanic tribes and Persians and all these different people, because Rome just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they were such a dominant force, which is why they were able to take over so many territories. But they got to a point where it was like they couldn't maintain the territories, because even if you conquered a certain place, you still had people trying to win it back the whole time. So even as you move further, you're having it like
getting
fall.
weaker and weaker.
Right. And then so as all this is happening, the way that it kind of like stumbled along is they would have like this huge Colosseum matches, and they just tried to please the people with entertainment so that they wouldn't riot and like absolutely lose their minds, because of the poverty and how there's no money and all the men are dying. And you just see that here. It's like we're sending all this money to Ukraine, and we have like a crazy homelessness problem here. We have a crazy police force problem here. No one wants to be a cop anymore. So even the cities that were doing well are now having crime problems. And it's just like, it's pretty trippy. So this 6 gene key hits pretty hard. What else you got though?
So it's just basically saying like to get to the peace, you basically have to drop your defenses and allow and become like emotionally mature and allow this to open the heart and feel more like empathetic and less like defense and nervousness. They were saying it's like a biofeedback loop. So when you have your defenses high, you feel nervousness, and then the other people around you will then feel more defensive and nervous, and it just keeps like perpetuating itself.
Right.
And saying that basically you have to drop your defense and allow the heart to stay open in the situation. And then towards that, you can be on your way towards the path of peace. And then it was saying the empty boat story, basically the tale about a gentleman that was on a boat, and he was peacefully waiting in the water, and this man had reached spiritual enlightenment, and another man in another boat had bumped into this man, or the first man bumped into the second man while he was in the water, and the second man reacted in a very angry, aggressive way, shouting at the man. And to the second man's dismay, the first man had no reaction, and he was just staring out into the lake without any emotional friction. And so it's just saying that for him, there was no one to be shouted at, and therefore no emotion to be had. And so just saying like the larger perspective to like span out.
Right. So essentially he didn't see him as a self anymore, so he didn't have an ego to get angry at. That one reminds me of one of the universal laws that you can get from, I want to say it's like the 7 laws of the universe that was made by, the Hermetic laws. So like one of the Hermetic principles is about frequency. There's 7 different ones, and the one that I'm referring to specifically is the law of cause and effect. And it just talks about how we're mostly in a reactive state, and that if you can rise above the reactive state, you'll be less likely to be pushed around by the universe, and you'll be able to affect the universe instead of being affected by the universe. Mm-hmm. And so in order to do that, you have to get out of the reactive nature. In order to get out of the reactive nature, you have to remove yourself from the ego, or at least create separation from it. And I had this one moment that I really saw this. It was at the restaurant that we used to work at, and one of the girls was just having like an emotional breakdown from we're all stressed out, angry, hungry, right, tired, And she was just complaining about it. And me and this other guy we're in like the beverage station, and she's complaining, and my buddy just says to her, and she's like, oh, I'm gonna quit, blah, blah, blah. And my buddy goes, bye, Felicia. And I just started cracking up laughing, which made the roast hurt even more. And yeah, she just like walked out. And she just like walked out on the shift. And she literally had just finished a table. It was a 12 top where one of the ladies had just graduated. And then her boyfriend proposed to her. Like right after she left, they did a proposal. And so not only did I get to grat this 12 top, but then the mom was just like so happy about everything that she gave me an extra money. Yeah, gave me an extra $200 cash. And I ended up taking over these tables. And then she also had another 6 top that was easy, like they're ready to go. They tipped full like 25% or something on a huge table. And then so I literally didn't do anything. I literally was just like standing around, and I'm like, well, y'all want me to take these tables or what? And they're like, yeah, I guess take these tables. They're like, the managers are all upset that she left and wondering what's happening. And I was just like, all right, I'll take the tables. And I legit didn't know what was going on. I'm just like, fine, I'll take these tables. I go take these tables, and I'm like cashing them out. All the work was done. I think I filled up some waters. And then all of a sudden I made like an extra $300. No, $400. And I was just like, well, that's the hermetic law of cause and effect. Like, you can't let your emotions push you around, and you can't let people's words push you around. And only by not letting those things push you around can you come from a place of free will, right? Like, if you're constantly just reacting to people, you essentially don't have free will. You can only take it back by, again, creating that separation of the ego. And so, yeah, that day I was like, yeah, can't let the emotions push us around. And I think we all know, like, time and time again, of like how we can like self-sabotage our opportunities because we're either angry or sad, or, you know, like maybe you have a good opportunity, but like something else makes you mad or angry, and then you're just like, say whatever to that, or you don't respect that opportunity anymore because you're feeling some type of way about something completely different.
Yeah, it can definitely affect other parts of your life and decision making, for sure. Yeah, I had a similar experience with guests at the restaurant all the time, that they're upset and they try to take it out on you, and then you basically have to just, like, when someone's mean to me, I just say thank you or you're welcome. And I try not to do it in like a sarcastic, polarizing way. I just like very neutral, like respectful. And sometimes they'll take it as like a sarcastic, like they'll be even more upset that you said something nice to them. And so it's pretty funny in and of itself that even if you try to be nice in these situations, they can still take that as an attack, because they're in such a defensive state that anything you say can be taken as an attack. Mm-hmm. So it's like, even if you really do try to be nice, it can still backfire in that sense.
Yeah. One of the things it was talking about that was really interesting to me is, like, one, it was talking about, so the shadow that we've been talking about is conflict, but the gift that you start to gather as you transcend the shadow is diplomacy. And one of the aspects of diplomacy it was speaking on was honesty and timing, how they're like two big parts of diplomacy. And obviously, you're not going to be able to be diplomatic if you're not honest. So the honesty one, to me, seems kind of obvious, right? If you're going to try to help someone come from where they're at, you're going to have to be honest with yourself. And through that comes that ability. But the timing thing makes a lot of sense, because in jiu-jitsu, it's the same thing. Like, even if you know the correct thing to do, you have to do it at the right time. So a lot of things can change based on your setup and the timing of it. It's like, not only do you have to know this thing, but you have to know when to do it. And if you do it correctly, but at the wrong time, it won't matter, because I'll have sensed it, or your opponent senses it or knows that you're going to do it and then counters your answer, or doesn't even let you do it because they know it's coming, right? So that whole thing of timing is pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And it's saying that basically these people with this gift frequency, they're able to, in a sense, feel what the other person is feeling and know exactly what to say and when to say it, how to say it. They can like tap into that emotional state that they're experiencing so far that they know exactly how to nullify the situation.
Right. Yeah, sometimes you want to like walk someone into an answer, right? So that they almost come up with it themselves. You don't want to just give them the answer to their problem, right? So like someone's angry about something and you're just like, don't be angry. This is why. They're probably not going to be able to take that and understand it. But if you've been angry about that before and you understand the thought process and you can kind of walk them through the same thoughts that led you to a better mind state, then maybe you could do that for them as well. Right? Same thing with like techniques. Is like sometimes a technique evolves as you progress in your own journey. So your final version of it might be completely different than the way that you should teach it to someone else, because maybe the way that you're doing it, you're counterbalancing for all these different things that you know come from opponents at that level. But for a white belt, it's just too much for them. So they need like some super simplistic version of that. And then they've got to mess it up and try it a bunch of times before it can actually even get close. Right, into what you're doing. And one of the classic examples I've been running into that with lately is the Kimura setup, which is a bent arm bar. It's a shoulder lock. And it's very powerful in the beginning stages, but it starts to lose its luster the further you get up the belts, because it becomes less effective because people get better at defending it. And then so when you do go for it, you usually use it for like, it's very rare that you're like ripping Kimuras on people at the black belt level. You don't see that happening very often unless you're going against someone way out of your league, way below your league. So a lot of times you'll see like Kimura trap systems where you use the Kimura to go to the back, or you use it to set up triangles. But very rarely do you see like a very basic 1-2 Kimura setup. And because of that, I just don't teach it that often. But looking through my journey, I use the Kimura all the time coming up. So I don't use it, I don't really look for it that often now. But when I was coming up, I looked for it all the time. And so now it's like I have to make sure I'm teaching them like the steps and not exactly where I'm at in the moment. And I feel like that's kind of what it's relating to here as well, right? You have to be able to go to where people are at in their thought process and thought processes, and then walk them through it.
Yeah, we saw that also in the movie that we watched last night, that there was an over-eager office assistant to this lady that had reached like the highest level in the agency. And he was just like super excited, super highly detailed, like couldn't wait to tell her the information that he had just researched, and like overexcited about it. And he's just like, yeah, and I have this and this, and putting all these things, tying all these things together and making a logical like framework of his thought process. And she's just like, whoa, slow down. Like, you can't just tie all these things together, and this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. And then one of her partner walks by, and he was like, hey, don't you remember you were in that position at one time? And she's like, I can't remember that at this point in my journey, or something along those lines. She's like, I can't relate. Like, she's like, yes, I was, but I can't relate now, because she's like so far ahead. So she was just kind of like brushing the guy off and not like taking what he's saying like as serious as he was taking it.
Right.
But the information that he relayed to her was the key information to solving the actual connection, like of who did the crime. So it was a very important aspect.
Yeah, she like wrote him off on it. Yeah, he was all excited about it. And then she goes, yeah, good job. But also, yeah, you don't be calling to help with other organizations unless it goes through me. And well, he ended up being like taped up by the guy. So she's like, yeah, go ahead. Go in on your mission. And then he goes and does it. And then the dude like, he doesn't realize that this dude is not supposed to be messed with. Mm-hmm. And so he shows up at his house, and then he ends up duct taped.
He misses like a small piece of information.
Yeah.
And it backfires.
Yeah, it backfired, which is pretty funny. But you see that a lot too with like one of the funniest jokes that we make in the martial arts community is like white belts getting all excited for tapping a blue belt or tapping another white belt, and they're all like telling you about it, and then you're like, great, cool story, dude. Like no one cares if you submit a blue belt. But if you remember when you were a white belt and you submitted your first blue belt, it's like it really is a big deal. It's just so funny that by the time you're like you're seasoned in it, you're just like, yeah, cool story, dude. It's almost seen as like a negative thing to brag about tapping somebody, but everyone knows that when you were that's like the first thing you want to tell everybody is, oh dude, I finally got him, or whatever.
Yeah, and then it was saying at the highest level that basically the pH in your body even transforms and evolves, and basically that through transmuting the conflict, we are transforming our genetic pathways as well, and saying that people at this highest level, that the Buddhists and monks, that our current genetic vehicle is not capable of evolving at the rate that their consciousness is evolving. So through this you can see a lot of like bodily dysfunctions and issues that these people at this high conscious level are having currently in this human form, and that basically as we evolve more as a collective, that the bodies will in and of themselves transform genetically, physically, and all of the above, and we'll be able to house this consciousness more comfortably, and that they basically become beings of light, and they have, like, if you've ever heard the saying rainbow body or light body, or so basically their skin transforms into like a translucent color. And
I guess. Yeah, that's something I don't really have experience with, but I just have to take the book's word for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that it could be true. I think that anything can be true, so.
Yeah. So, yeah, one of the natures of the shadow of conflict, it was talking about like its reactive nature is tactlessness, or being tactless. And that caught my eye too, because in the Marine Corps we had 11 leadership traits, and one of them was tact. So it was, tact is basically being able to say something in a manner that is appropriate. For example, if you're having an issue with someone, maybe let's say someone of the same leadership, right? You want to be able to approach them in a respectful manner about an issue. You don't just like call them out on it. So like for example, a very common one is if you're in a position of leadership, you never want to call out another person in a position of leadership in front of those being led. So if they're lower ranks around, you don't want to call someone else out. You want to pull them aside or catch them when no one else is around, so that it can be dealt in a private manner, because when there's eyes on you, it like affects your ego more often. It's hard to separate your ego when there's eyes on you. So if someone, so again, if you have an issue that you're trying to address, you always want to like take them somewhere else or address it offline. And then another one would be like in the way that you correct somebody. You don't want to come at somebody with a correction. You just kind of want to, again, you want to approach it in a tactful nature, which means like, again, diplomatic. You want to be diplomatic about the way that you lead people. You don't want to just be like, hey, dickhead, you ain't supposed to do this, blah, 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 blah. Hey, like one of the most common things you get is like people do this, because in this, people want to talk about toxic masculinity. It exists in the Marine Corps. And this is like the kind of shit you'd get to, like, hey, you devil dog, and like point at you and like yell at you. And it's like, whether you are wrong or not, and whether you realize it or not, someone snaps at you, points your fingers at you, and like starts yelling at you, your whole thing is like, you know what, dude, F you. I don't care what you're saying to me. Like it's instant wall comes up. But if someone's like, comes at you more, like put their hand on your back and be like, hey man, don't forget you're supposed to wear your cover when you leave the barracks, or whatever correction it is you have to make. You know, you almost want to put it in like, hey, don't forget this rule in case you forgot, but if you know, we got to make sure we do these things. You're going to receive a much better outcome from the individual, or they're not going to immediately put up a wall, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like the same thing, the attack and defense, that basically you can't come at someone with an attack because they'll put their defenses up.
Right.
And so yeah, just like reaching into their perspective and understanding like, hey, maybe they didn't know. Or maybe I told them a couple times, but they forgot. Maybe they're thinking about something else and they just accidentally did it without thinking. Like they have a habit. And it's like just correcting them in a way that they don't feel attacked. They don't feel like it's not some common mistake, because if it wasn't a common mistake, it wouldn't happen. So.
Right. And yeah, you have to develop a relationship with the team that you're on, right? Because not only are you their leader, but you rely on them. Like if you try to come out at your team as if you're on a pedestal, like you're higher than them, that only works until the team as a whole is put under stress. Right? If there is no stress, then yeah, you can do that. And that's what you see a lot of times, when the leader's like super hard on those underneath them and doesn't take the time to to build that relationship, that as soon as the entire team comes under stress, every person for themselves. Because just before, they felt like you didn't have their back before the stress. So as soon as things get intensified, the first thing that they're going to do is not look out for you. And that's like a classic thing in the Marine Corps. The joke is like, oh, you guys just going to throw me under the bus, like throwing someone under the bus. Well, it's like a joke that like if you throw your team under the bus, when it'll come back around, they'll throw you under the bus. Mm-hmm. It's just like, if kind of like that thing where it's like, oh, you take credit for the job that they do, you're like, oh no, it was my idea, blah, 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 blah. And then something goes wrong, you're like, I told them to do it, right? It's like, that works in the short term. But then eventually, they're going to go to those guys first and being like, yes, what is the issue? And they're all going to go, well, they're going to throw you right under there. And it's so funny. We saw that on the new Avatar show. Zuko, right, had his squad, and he's like their leader, but he's like so distraught with his relationship of his father. He like puts that on them, right? He's miserable because he was like separated. He was, what do you call it? Excommunicated, banned. Mm-hmm. What do you call it when someone's kicked out of the group?
Yeah, they basically banned him.
Not banned, but exiled.
Oh yeah.
They exiled him with a whole crew. So this crew didn't even do anything wrong, but because of this guy, it's like his whole ship now. It's like, so you guys are all going to do what Prince Zuko has to do, which is find the Avatar, and he's not allowed to come back until then. And because he felt some type of way with his relationship with his father, he like puts it on his crew, but his crew is going through the same thing with him. And so there's like this split happening. And then essentially the Fire Emperor, right, puts them in charge of someone else, puts someone else in charge of that group. And when the new leadership comes in, Prince Zuko wants loyalty from his guys. He's like, you're literally going to listen to this guy? And they're like, dude, why would we listen to you over him when you didn't even have our backs before? And he's like, I'm going to listen to the person that's paying me, which is like our loyalty is to the Fire Lord, right? But if he would have been nicer to them, because they were all exiled. Right? If it would have been more of a community, it would have been more like us versus them. He's like, no, they did send us out here with you, and it's been us this whole time. But because he kind of pushed them away and made fun of them and treated them like dirt, they're like, no, we're not out here with you. And the first chance that we get to go back with them, that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Pretty funny. And I feel like I'm going through that. Yeah, again, with just like working with people and then students. It's like that whole thing of just like, you got to understand the way that you treat people, right or wrong. I mean, that's what the tactfulness comes from, or the reactive nature comes from, like, right, someone believes that they're correct in a conflict. And it's like, well, no, I'm right, and this person is doing the wrong thing. And it's like, okay, well, even if you're right, there's still a proper way to, or a better way of explaining it than just like coming at someone, right? And that's where the tactfulness comes in. Because if you believe you're right, you can almost be mean to someone because you feel like you're on a pedestal, right? Where it's like, no, well, this is how it's supposed to go, blah, blah, blah. And that's where you lose like tact. And that's why it's an important part of leadership.
Yeah, and the same thing that you're saying, it's like remembering, like if you are at a higher state than the people below you, remembering what it was like to be one of them and be going through what they're going through. And it's like, and also be willing to assist them in their work with them side by side. Like not just standing from the high ground and then barking orders at them, but like willing to jump in when necessary, and even like remembering the skills that it takes to be able to help them in the ways that they need. Like you see that a lot with people that are so far above that they're no longer versed in the skill set, so they're incapable of actually physically helping you. So the only thing that they can do is yell at you and criticize you, but they're not even criticizing and yelling at you in a way that's useful for anything, because they're no longer experiencing what you're experiencing, and they're no longer capable of imagining or empathizing with what you're going through.
Right.
Like, whoa, you should be doing this. And it's like, well, you come work back here and you tell me what you think after experiencing what I'm experiencing. And then maybe we can come to a better conclusion together. But you from the outside looking in is not necessarily helping unless you're inside of that skill and experiencing the same thing.
Right. I think most people forget that when they become a manager, it's not because they're the best bartender or the best server or the best whatever. A manager means you're supposed to learn how to be a troop handler or someone who manages people. And the way that you manage people is, again, by understanding their experience and helping them through that. Like, if you're a manager and you're like, oh, you guys need to be doing this, you guys need to be doing this, you're essentially just going to push the whole team away. And then you're going to wonder why no one's like got your back, willing to go the extra mile for you. You know, the only way someone is going to be willing to go the extra mile for you is if you're willing to go the extra mile for them. And the only way you can go the extra mile for someone is if you understand where they're at. Yeah, you know, you made a really solid point, and obviously we see this a lot in the businesses that we work in, right? With the managers at restaurants. I mean, it's just constant where it's like they want so much from you, but they're not willing to help you with where you're at in the job. It's like, oh, here's these impossible amount of expectations, but also you're not going to make any money, but also you know, you're not going to get the best tables, but also we can't guarantee you any days off, but also we need you on all these shifts. It's like, do you think that you would put up with this if you were in my situation? You know what I mean? Or the classic example of someone in a higher position trying to undermine your complaints or your experience because it's not measurable to what they're going through. Like, that is one of the quickest ways to push your team away, right? Because if someone gives you more responsibility, you can't then use that as like a way to disencourage your team members from saying what's on their mind or complaining. And what I mean by that is like, if someone's of a higher rank, more likely they have to deal with more stress. They'll have more responsibilities and have to work more hours. You, as a team member, are still going to experience like extreme stress or whatever, and you'll come to that person and you'll be like, hey, these things aren't happening, blah, blah, blah. Or, man, I'm overworked and I really feel stressed out. They'll just be like, oh, yeah, well, I had to work this many hours. I had to do this. And that's like one of the number one things you run into the Marine Corps. They're like, oh, well, I ain't slept in this long. Or, yeah, well, I haven't eaten since yesterday. So, you know, it's like always a joke that like young Marines always only care about chow. We call food chow. And it's like, oh, chow time. You guys just want chow. All y'all care about is chow, huh? Kind of thing. And it's like, you know, obviously if you've been in for a while, you just learn to like go without eating. But if you're new in the military and you're stressed out, like the only thing you literally like live like chow.
That's the only comfort.
Yeah, the only comfort is food. So
there's no women around.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of mean men.
If you're just in the military, right? If you just joined yeah, you literally exist chow time to chow time. It's like you eat breakfast
You
and
barely make it.
you can't wait till fucking lunch. It's like a break from reality. And when you're a higher up, you're just like more conditioned. So yeah, it wouldn't bother me to go like a long periods without eating. It's just like
Yeah, get
I could
used
go
to
the
it.
whole day without eating, and I'll just eat at night because you just got so much going on. And if like you get to a point where you're able to like, one, if you'll be without food or not, and so you kind of already got a system, or you know where to get food from if in a hurry, like you got a whole system built on how to survive the military. So you're just conditioned to it. But the new ones are never are. So like they're always like, is it chow time yet? We're gonna get some food. You're like, oh Christ, or something. But yeah, again, it's like if you can remember what it's like being them, it's like food is important, and the Marine Corps has gotten a lot better on that. It's like as the years went on, you'd see that it's like, no, Marines should be fed 3 times a day, and it's true. It's like, here's this one thing. It's like, yes, you definitely want to be conditioned to not worry about food, right? You shouldn't have to be a big baby and need food immediately when you're hungry. But at the same time, if you want the best output from your team, you gotta feed them. If you fed them, they work way harder. So it's like this balance of like, hey, make sure the Marines are fed so that they can come back and be focused. But also don't be crying about being fed the whole time, right? It's like, don't cry about it, but also make sure they're getting it, funny dynamic there.
Yeah, you were. Forgot the point at this point, so give me a second.
Yeah, no, we were talking about tactfulness and how managers always try to put it on you about, oh, well, I worked this many hours, so.
Oh yeah, so one of my really good friends, he just left my workplace, and I just found out about it the other day, and I was just like, man, this is one of the best guys here. Like, why the heck did he leave? Like, what could have made him leave? And so I'm like asking around, and I finally found out the reason. It's because his uncle was extremely sick and in the hospital, and he requested off to go see him for his last couple days. Like, super depressing. And he's like, hey, I need off. It's a Monday. It's not going to be very busy. Like, usually make cuts. Can you just please make sure that I'm going to be off on this day? And we just got like a new refresh in management. And so the new general manager he called 3 people off. He told him, yes, I'll give you this day off, no problem. Called 3 other people off, completely forgot that he made that agreement with this guy, and scheduled him to work that day. And he's like, hey, I'm not coming in. And then he was like, well, you have to come in for your shift. Completely forgetting that he had this whole conversation with him about his uncle. And he's like, just not even treated in a human way. And so he's like, whenever he addressed it, the general manager's response was, oh, well, I've been waiting on this package to come in the mail for over a year now, and it came in today, and I just completely forgot. And so it's like the same thing that you're saying. It's like they'll put what they're going through as an excuse to treat you anyway.
Right.
And so it's like, that was a day that this guy would never get back. It's like the last days of this guy's life. And it's like, you expect him to come to work? It's like, who is he going to choose at that point? And so he's like, if this is the way that I'm going to be treated, this sets the precedence. And then he just didn't want to be there at all. He was like, if this is the way that I'm being viewed, then bye. And he just left.
Dang.
Yeah.
Man, when you're telling me the story, I was trying not to laugh because it reminded me of that movie Horrible Bosses, where the exact same thing happened. He was like trying to tell him about, he's like, no, you remember when I tried to call off for my gam and I didn't get to see her that day
he's
because
like,
of this. And he's like,
Gam.
he's like, just starts laughing. He's like, I didn't know you called her gam. And it's like so messed up. He's like, I worked for you 20 extra hours and stayed overnight, and I didn't get to see my gam for Christmas. And he goes, you call her gam? It's just like such a dick move. But no, that's how people are like. They become you get so beaten down from the stress that you become like, you don't care about other people's emotions. You become like dead to it. And you'll see this in martial arts coaches, because you get like so desensitized. So like I've seen like I've like busted my knee up, and my coach is like, yeah, he's like, you'll be fine. But I'm like in a full panic.
Dying.
Yeah. And he's just like,
The end of
whatever.
the world.
And just walks away. And it's just like, and in the moment it's just like, how could you not care, dude? Like what the F? But yeah, same thing in the course, same thing in jiu-jitsu. You just become so conditioned to it. Like, yeah, people get hurt and they'll literally be bawling tears, and I'll literally just stare at them like, yeah, you're going to be okay, dude. 6 weeks. And they're like, 6 weeks? And I'm like, that's not that long. I could say 6 months. You're lucky. 6 weeks is not a long time. And they're like freaking out, but it's like the levels of experience.
Yeah, just like that little girl that got injured in that class. It's like, for her, that was the end of the world, because she had never experienced a pain like that.
Oh, yeah.
But once you experience a certain level of pain, you have a higher tolerance. So it's just like pain tolerance. The same thing with weightlifting. It's like once you allow your body to feel what it's like to lift heavier, then your body is more capable of going that far. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you can just keep going further. But it's like until you experience a certain level of weight, you don't know if you can do it. So your body is less willing to even go that far to begin with, so you're like constantly pushing higher.
Yeah, same thing in jiu-jitsu. I can just hang out in chokes. Well, it's a lot of fully locked choking, and I just like this, just surviving.
Where someone else would have just tapped.
Right. And so, yeah, just that whole thing it was also talking about with how diplomacy isn't just a skill. It's not like just this trick of like getting what you want out of people or placating people, but it's an energetic embodiment that you can have. Like it affects your aura, and that you're able to sense where someone is coming from and be able to really like tune into their frequency and help them along with whatever situation that they're going through. And that makes so much sense. I think I've seen it with you before. But you see how people who are like next level communicators, where they can kind of understand where someone's at and see where they're coming at from a situation or an angle. And I see this with really high level leaders. And this book says it comes from that person having like inner peace. Like you're at such peace, you can just sense when someone's in conflict even before it arises.
Happens.
And it makes so much sense because you're that in tune. And I feel like, yeah, when you are like really open and you're mindful of, I guess I would say your awareness, you can pick up on other people's awarenesses and where they're at and where it's at. So that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I saw this picture. It was basically these two characters, and one of them was down inside of a hole, and he's like, I can't find the way out. I can't see the way out. And then the other one like climbed in there with him, and he's like, well, I'll go down there with you and I'll help you find your way out. It's like the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like you can't tell him just to get out. He doesn't understand how. So it's
Right.
like you have to be willing to go the depths and take their hand and show them the way out.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so it was shadow. The shadow was conflict. The gift is diplomacy, and then peace is the Siddhi, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely feel like the more at peace you are with yourself, the more you attract people to you. I feel like people can definitely sense it. Because people can definitely sense conflict when someone has conflict within themselves. And I feel like, yeah, you definitely become more aware to people's conflicts when you yourself have done a lot of work on your own situation. One of the things it also said too that I was really interested in, it was just saying how we can't solve these world conflicts without first solving our personal conflicts, like our personal relationships. And it's like, that's so true. It's like, that's like another thing in business too, and in MMA. In both business and MMA, a lot of the people will tell you is like, make sure all your personal stuff is squared away. You can't give your best to business or martial arts if you're conflicted at home, or if you're in MMA, then at work. Or if at work, then your relationships or your mind.
Yeah, because as much as you want to leave it at the door or just switch from one to another, it does all affect everything. 100%. So it's all one.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing else you got.
But yeah, I was just saying that the sixth siddhi is our natural form, and it will be our final form as a human consciousness. It's where all the myths of peace, of like the Garden of Eden, stem from, is the Siddhi of Peace.
We appreciate you guys tuning in. Catch you guys later.